welcome again to our Millets webinar. By our, I mean North American Millets Alliance, and collaborating with the Feast Lab at the University of Missouri and the Center for Regenerative Agriculture at the University of Missouri as well. This is our 8th collaborative webinar on millets in 2023. It's been going very well. I see there are so many folks who have been here before, but it looks like there's some new folks too. So welcome to everyone. Today's theme is, today's title is On and Off the Shelf, Millet Products in Markets Today. And we have very fortunate to have two presenters. We have, each of whom will make maybe a 15 to 20 minute presentation, and then we'll have a Q&A session. Our first speaker will be Caroline Sluyter, who is Program Director of the Oldways Whole Grain Council. She will present on products made with millets and the growth in the numbers of these products over the last decade. Caroline will also draw on the whole grain stamped product database, a unique resource of product information. And we also have, coming a long way in time and distance, from India, Tapas Chandra Roy. It's 2 or 3 in the morning and where he is. Tapas is so thank you very much, Tapas, for staying awake. Tapas is a certified farm advisor for millets at the National Institute of Agricultural Extension Management in India. He's an author and a longtime expert an advocate for millets. He will present on millet products from India, which is the largest producer and processor of a wide variety of millets. So as you see, we have very different perspectives here today. We're very happy to have those and expect this will be very informative. I'll say a little bit more now about Caroline, and then I'll say something more about Tapas when it's his turn to speak. Caroline, again, is Program Director for Oldways Whole Grains Council, which is a program that's run by the food and nutrition nonprofit called Oldways, based in Boston, Massachusetts. Caroline oversees the Whole Grain Stamp program and heads up the Whole Grain Council's education and promotional activities, including a whole day for whole grain in March, Whole Grains Month and Whole Grains Month in September, coming right up. Caroline has been active in the International Whole Grain Initiative since 2017, chairing the Communications and Partnerships Working Group and serving on the governing board of the organization. Caroline holds a Master's of Science from Tufts University, the Friedman School of Nutrition, Science and Policy, and also has a bachelor's from Smith College. Thank you both. And I'll introduce Tapas in more detail when it's her turn, but thank you both, and thanks everyone for being here. And Caroline, it's all yours, please.
Thank you so much. I just want to make sure you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. Let me just move this. And I apologize in advance. I have a slight cold, so I have a little bit of a cough, but I'm going to try and keep that under control. So thank you so much for the introduction. I've had so much fun diving into our stamped product database and teasing out all kinds of great information about millet products that appear on store shelves today. And I'm really looking forward to sharing this data with you. The Oldways Whole Grains Council is a nonprofit nutrition education organization. We help consumers find whole grains and understand their benefits. We help manufacturers and restaurants create more and better whole grain foods. And we help the media to write accurate and compelling stories about whole grains. When we talk about whole grains, we are, of course, talking about grains that still have all of their bran, germ, and endosperm. The Oldways Whole Grains Council is perhaps best known for its whole grain stamp program, which began in 2005. We review whole grain product formulations and offer third-party certification for the whole grain content of products. We permit approved products to use our whole grain stamp packaging symbol. And products that use any one of our 3 stamp types that you can see here on the slide must contain at least 8 grams of whole grain per serving. So by looking for the stamp on products, consumers know that they're going to be getting at least a half serving of whole grain. The stamp also tells them exactly how many grams each product contains, so they can easily compare the whole grain content of products when they're shopping. Our stamped products database includes more than 13,000 food products, spanning nearly every grocery category imaginable. This expansive database offers us an amazing view of whole grain trends over time and is a valuable resource in learning more about the way manufacturers are utilizing ingredients like millets in today's marketplace. So our team has just wrapped up a census representative survey of 1,500 American consumers, and the results are actually going to be published on our website next week. So feel free to stop by and check that out. We asked all kinds of questions about whole grain knowledge, habits, attitudes, experiences, and our goal was really to better understand today's consumer and the reasons they choose or don't choose whole grain foods. So our survey asked about a lot of different types of grains, how many people had heard of them, how many people had eaten them, and for those who had eaten that type of grain, how many people ranked it as one of their favorites. Our survey found that 40% of Americans have heard of millet, 34% have heard of sorghum, and 6% have heard of teff. When we asked how many people had tried each of these ingredients, we learned that 13% of Americans report trying millet, 10% say they've had sorghum, and 2% say they've tasted teff. Millets are an important but often underutilized member of the whole grain category. And of course, we would love to see familiarity with millets continue to increase in coming years. The good news is that there is already some traction in that direction. So significantly more people in 2023 have heard of millet and teff compared to those who said they were familiar with these grains just 2 years ago. In fact, you can see a consistent trend with more consumers having heard of and tried millet, sorghum, teff, and fonio since we asked consumers in 2021. I want to take a moment to explain a little bit about the terminology that I'm using. So while sorghum, teff, and fonio are all varieties of millets, they're usually labeled distinctly in our database without the term millet attached to them. So a search through the data for millets does not capture all of these products. For that reason, I've kept these categories of data separate from the millet category. And another note is that in the US, products labeled just millet most often refer to proso millet. However, our database represents products sold in 65 countries around the world. And so when searching the term millet in our database, this search term also captures ingredients that include, it captures more than just proso millet ingredients. It's going to include products that list finger millet, pearl millet, and so on. So we're really capturing lots of products there. As you all know, there are many reasons to fall in love with millets. First of all, they offer all the amazing health benefits that come along with whole grains. Whole grains have been shown to lower your risk of stroke, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and colorectal cancer. They also contribute to maintaining a healthy weight, and they reduce inflammation in the body. Millets are rarely refined, and so choosing millet products can be means those who are choosing millet products can be quite confident that they are getting the benefits of whole grains. Millets also offer great environmental benefits and are some of the most sustainable crops in existence. They are drought resistant and quite resilient in extreme weather. And as C4 cereal grains, they undergo a type of photosynthesis that produces a 4-carbon compound and reduces water vapor losses compared with C3 cereals like wheat and rice. This reduces the need for significant irrigation inputs when compared with other crops. Millets are popular because they are naturally gluten-free. The gluten-free fad that took off about 10 years ago opened a lot of doors for lesser-known grains, including millets. As a vocal minority of people were avoiding wheat, barley, and rye, food companies developed creative products featuring gluten-free ancient grains like proso millet, sorghum, and teff. And in doing so, they introduced a whole new audience to the diversity of flavors among these ingredients. Over roughly the same period of time, ancient grains in general have been gaining a lot of traction among consumers interested in expanding their culinary experiences, and consumers who are drawn to this kind of honest history of grains that have these long and rich pasts. This graph gives you a sense of how the prevalence of millet products available in stores has changed over the past decade and a half. This data comes from the Whole Grains Council's stamped product database, which represents all 13,000 products that have been registered and approved for our whole grain stamp packaging label. So you can see in 2010, products that included millet made up a little less than 9% of all registered products. That number has stayed relatively steady, coming in at just over 9% of products today. And the trajectories of sorghum and teff have been a little more exciting, with sorghum growing from about 0.5% of products to 3.5% of products today, and teff rising from about 1/3% in 2010 to just about 2% today. We're hopeful that the International Year of Millets is going to have a similar effect on millet representation as the International Year of Quinoa had several years ago. Quinoa grew from 2.5% of products in 2010 to over 12% of products today. So next, I want to give you a tour of millets and the ways that they show up in products that you might see in the grocery store. The products that I'm going to show you are all products that have been registered for the whole grain stamp and are therefore featured in our stamped product database. The first category that I'm going to start with is flours and grains. So these are millets in their most basic form. On my slide, you can see I've picked out some sprouted sorghum grain and flour. We've also got teff grains there. And there's a multigrain flour mix by Laxmi over there on the left, which is a blend of whole wheat flour with other flour ingredients, which include finger millet flour, corn flour, sorghum flour, barley flour, and oat flour. Next, we have several breakfast foods that utilize millets. So Bob's Red Mill makes a gluten-free tropical muesli that includes sorghum. Dr. Prager's Oatmeal Littles features teff flour. Arrowhead Mill's sprouted corn flakes include sorghum flour. And Bobo's toaster pastries contain millet alongside several other grains. The bread category is huge. In fact, almost half of all stamped products that contain millets fall into this category. We see countless examples of companies utilizing millet seeds in multigrain breads and wraps. We see pizza doughs like this Manini's pizza dough that features a mix of millet, teff, and sorghum flours together. Lots of really interesting stuff going on in this category. Millet pastas are a little less common, but we know that the demand for whole grain pastas in general is on the rise. And so we are expecting that this category is going to continue to grow. Here we've got Manini's, Mrs. Miller's, and Ronzoni These are all pastas that use a blend of millet, sorghum, and teff flour alongside other grains. And finally, we have the snacks category. So the examples I've picked include late July's tortilla chips with millet, rice ups, rice cakes that also include millet, Milton's crackers that include both millet seeds and millet flour, and these good health pretzels made with sorghum flour. So you can see the uses of millet are really varied. It's a versatile ingredient and shows up in all kinds of different places you might not necessarily expect to see it. Here's a breakdown of products using millet ingredients that gives you kind of a sense of which categories are most prominent. You can see millets show up kind of across the board, but the bread category certainly dominates with 46% of millet products coming under this umbrella. Millets are also prominent in cereals and snacks, and they're starting to make more of a name for themselves in categories like baking mixes and pastas. Since we've just conducted a large consumer insights survey that I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, I thought it might be neat to kind of dive into that data a bit more and create a sort of profile for millet enthusiasts in order to help us understand who these consumers are who are purchasing millet products and what sets them apart from consumers overall. So the following characteristics describe those consumers who told us they are familiar with and have eaten either millet, sorghum, or teff. First, as we take a look at basic demographic information, we find that those who have tried millets are more likely than the general population to be baby boomers, to be parents, and to be vegan. They are more likely to be either Caucasian, Asian, or Native American, and they are more likely to have a graduate degree. So the fact that this crowd tends to be a bit older was actually really surprising to me. I think of Gen Z and millennials as being especially food savvy. You know, they've grown up with all kinds of celebrity chefs and cooking shows and cooking celebrities on Instagram and TikTok. And I think of them as being more knowledgeable about lesser known ingredients. But in this case, it is the boomers who are leading the way, which I think is really cool. And I know that as people age, they tend to get more health conscious. And so it's possible that we're seeing a group of consumers who are embracing millets for their health benefits in particular. Millet enthusiasts tend to be more nutrition savvy. They seek out whole grains and healthy foods in general, looking for high fiber foods and avoiding added sugars. But health is not the only thing that they're looking for. They also want their food to taste really good. They also prioritize sustainability, organic food, and local food economies more so than consumers overall. And we also found that these shoppers were more likely to recognize whole grains as sustainable foods. These consumers tend to be very knowledgeable about whole grains. They're familiar with many different types of grains, and in general, they feel comfortable cooking whole grains and identifying whole grains when they're shopping. They choose whole grain foods very often, and they see the taste and flavor of whole grains as much more of a benefit than a barrier to whole grain consumption. Millet lovers are comfortable cooking and often eat at home. They are careful shoppers who read the labels and nutrition facts panels, and they look for third-party certifications like the whole grain stamp. When asked about their favorite types of foods, they were more likely to rank Asian cuisines among their favorites, and they were less likely to rank American food, barbecue, and Italian food among their top choices. We asked what these consumers thought were the best ways to increase whole grain consumption, And they told us, first, we need to increase the variety and availability of whole grain foods. Second, we need to provide more education about whole grains. And third, we need to clearly label whole grain foods using tools like the whole grain stamp. And I think that all of these are really helpful ways to think about how we go about increasing the consumption of millets as well. We need to make sure that millets are widely available in a variety of products and are showing up in interesting and innovative ways that catch consumer attention. We need to teach consumers about the health benefits, the flavor advantages, and the environmental assets of millets. And we need to make sure that consumers know how to find millets and other whole grains by using trusted tools like the whole grain stamp. So on that note, I'm going to hand things back over to Jonathan, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Carolyn, and we'll get back to you for sure with questions. That was really encouraging and information, and very gives me hope for the future. We'll be back to you, Carolyn, for sure with questions. Now let's move to Tapas. Chandra Roy, again, thank you very much for being awake, Tapas. I'm going to say a little bit about you. You are a Millet certified farm advisor as recognized by the National Institute of Agricultural Extension Management and the Indian Institute of Millets Research, both of which are based in Hyderabad, India. Tapas has a degree in agriculture and an MBA in agrobusiness management from the Vaikuntha Mehta National Institute of Cooperative Management in Pune, India, and he is currently employed as a Block Agriculture Officer Deputy Project Director in the government of Odisha's Department of Agriculture and Farmers Empowerment. Tapas is promoting millets from farm to plate so that the benefits of millets reach as many people as possible, which is what we're all trying to do here. He's on a mission to bring millets to millions of people. He's in charge of implementing the Odisha Millet Mission on the ground. He helps farmers from sowing to harvesting by providing training and advisory services. Tapas is passionate about creating delicious and unique millet meals and has received national recognition for his efforts. He was the first winner and runner-up in the special millet biryani millet recipe contest held by the Indian Institute of Millet Research in Hyderabad. And in addition, he's the author of Millet Business Ideas, Empowering Millet Startups, which sounds extremely interesting. So Tapas, it's the floor is yours, or the screen is yours. We are really looking forward to hearing from you and then asking both of you questions.
Okay, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to talk to you all, and I hope I can give my valuable insight today. Let me share the screen. Just a minute. Is it visible?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much. As you have given a nice introduction, and it's like very a happy moment for me to talk about the millet products that is trending in India nowadays. As you know, this is the year where we are celebrating International Year of Millets. So as we know that India is one of the largest producer of millets, and basically there are 9 types of millets which is grown in India. But most probably, if I say about more 90% about we grow like pearl millet, sorghum, and finger millet, which we know as the major millets, and rest 10% were little millet, foxtail millet, barnyard millet, proso millet, kodo millet, and brown pepper millets that is grown by the farmers. So and this we call as the minor millets, and when it comes to the size and all that, we has also categorized into size and the area of where the millets has grown in terms of measure. But in minor millets, these are the millets which has a husk on it, and we need to remove the husk for the human consumptions. So what is it that we are talking about, where we are talking about the millets, and nowadays when we are seeing the food scenario in this market today, where we are looking for a product which is very gluten free, and and it's still there are a lot of people now are becoming more allergic to gluten. So this is the place where millets is fitting well. And when we look about the snacks items, or where we have the plant based where people are looking for, or the wellness segment where it is growing, so this fits millets in the best positions where we talk about today. So if we are targeting a market where all these categories fits, like if I say like millet is coming into all that. And I will take to use some of the products that is very well going well, and more of the more startups are coming nowadays in form of like bringing these millets into different categories and also different products. So the number one, which I say, the millet cereals, as we say, it is used mostly by the in the breakfast items, or when we talk about the millet rice, which we make like the specials on like dishes like biryani and all that, upma and all that. So in every side of the corner there in India where we see the people use millets in different forms. So nowadays, as these uh, people are becoming more aware on it, and they're expecting that millets should be a part of their diet. So millet mostly is also coming into the market where more people are accepting it. Other comes the millet flour, where more of the people where they find this millet flour where they use in the form of making breads, cakes, and muffins and all that. But there are also they are taking into the baby food items where the ragi malts are made, where the sproutings, germinations are done and made into flour. Another thing is that nowadays, where we see that a lot of people are very becoming sensitive to dairy milk. So millet beverages or the millet milk is also a trending product that is coming into the market nowadays. I see a lot of variation in cookies where we can see where there is a lot of 100% gluten-free cookies are coming up, and also for the children's where cookies is coming a more favorable, more favor, or the variation is coming in terms of favor, and also the types of millets that we are using. And it is also been seen that like it's like ragi, sorghum, pearl millet, that is also into part of that. Then other thing is that millet puffs, it is also used as snacks items where variations are coming up, where it is been used as the this millet puffs, it is used in making bars and all that, nutri bars and all that. As my previous presenter also discussed about millet and pastas, where noodles and pasta. So it is also the trending top. If I say the product, noodles is also been people are accepting it in a much better and fast way. But there are few one thing, and to say that when we are choosing a millet grains as a whole grain, a lot of people are there that they accept a product which is very nutritious in terms of that. And there are a lot of companies also are coming into where they are processing in a very where the moreover it is moreover polished, so the nutrient loss is more. So we should also take care of that so that it does not happen in the long run, so that we do not lose the nutrients part and all of these from millets. So if we are coming out with the products, and we should definitely know the end users need and what is their need, and what as a company or millet startup who are beginning into this journey of bringing millets products, we should always innovate millet products, which in terms of, like if I said, like germinations or maybe sprouting, so that the nutrient availability increases in the body. So in that way, we can bring a lot of innovative products into the market. As it has been researched and said that more than 80% people buy a product uh, which which has a more tastier, and taste drives the buying decisions of a consumer. So when we talk about millets, it should be like tastier, and it should be acceptable by the consumer, so that the repeating buying happens in the long run. And as we know that lot of awareness is needed in the market, where when we talk about millets, when in terms of nutrition, health, and all that. So brand communications, and it should happen in day-to-day basis, so that consumer can understand what these millet products are and what is its benefit, and that can lead into its actions. Yes, if when we are talking about a product or bringing a product, there are a lot of rise in price also. But when we are expecting someone to pay, or the consumer to pay for a product, so affordability comes into the questions, where we can where when we see that lot of products, when we ask the people that the price of millets is increasing day by day. So if we are bringing a product, it should be affordable by the common people, so that they can buy it again and again. So this much is from my side. If any questions, I will be happy.
Thank you very much, Tapas. Obviously, India is a leader in the world in millet production and consumption, and those of us who live more regularly in North America can learn a lot from the growing and consumption and marketing of millet products in India. This should be a very good question and answer discussion for both of you. Does anyone like to begin? Just jump in and ask your question. It's a fertile ground for information, that's for sure.
Sure, Jonathan. This is Olivia from the Center for Regenerative Ag. Not being familiar with millet, I'm wondering if anyone could shed light on the general growing season and conditions for growing millet.
In North America, I think we have an expert here, Gary. Is that right? There you go.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, growing seasons, the most millet in the US is grown for grain is by far proso. This year there was about 700,000 acres planted. Of that, I'm expecting about 600,000 will be actually harvested for grain this year, and it's harvested mostly in September. It's planted mostly in June, although as early as early May and as late as mid-July. It's photoperiod sensitive, very similar to soybeans, and so it will mature even as a double crop planted, we'll say in central or southern Kansas on south. But most of the millet is by far grown in Colorado, then Nebraska, and South Dakota. There are probably about 20 other states that grow millet, but at this point, it's not measured by USDA. So the numbers I'm giving you are the production areas in the fringes of the winter wheat belt, and virtually all millet is rotated in some way with winter wheat at this time.
Very helpful. Thank you so much, Gary.
You're welcome.
Who else would like to ask a question? Who's next?
I don't know if it's cheating if I jump in. If I jump in.
course
I'm
not.
also getting over a little cold. But one of the things I'm Joni. I'm one of the co-founders of NAMA, for those of you who are not familiar with me. And I own a company that makes products out of millets for North American distribution. And one of the things that we've encountered a lot, and I have a lot of discussions with my Indian counterparts and colleagues, that the access to value-added processing is so radically different in India versus North America. And that's really helped catalyze a lot of path to market for millets, especially more, overlooked millets in our North American ecosystem, like proso millet and sorghum. Maybe a little bit of teff is about all we have here. And, after doing a deep dive, there was not a single processor in the entire North American continent that I can find that can even process small millets. So I had a question for Tapas and for Caroline both together. Like, what are some things we could do here in North America that would help catalyze this market, kind of like what has happened in India with an allocation of funds and financial support and grants to help catalyze this value-added processing and growth of new brands around millets? So loaded question. Thank you.
Yeah, Johnny. Hi Johnny. It's nice to hear from you. And I will say, if you are thinking of bringing proso millets, or we are thinking of processing it, we need to bring some small processing units, so that it can happen in the small level, where we, like India, where we see a lot more decentralized machines have been come very small, and but it's not much. It is like 1.5 lakhs rupees in Indian currency. So if it is like in the bigger context, where big processors comes, though there are becoming it will take lot of investments also. But if I will suggest that you can go with a small one, so gradually that can slowly increase your product also in the coming days.
I'm certainly hearing a lot more from farmers that they're interested in doing some vertical integration up the value chain and putting, dehulling equipment and things on the farms. But it's really kind of a big barrier we have here in North America, I think, for adoption of millets in general. Caroline, I don't know if you have any insight into that, from the bigger lever or regulatory policy side of things.
Well, the thing that it reminds me of is kind of this renaissance that we're seeing in local grain economies. I know there's kind of a thriving local grain economy happening in New England right now. And it was started by a lot of really creative farmers and business owners in Maine. And I think it began in Maine and has trickled into other states. But one of the challenges that they saw in kind of starting out on this endeavor was that there just weren't good milling options for these commodity crops. And so there wasn't the incentive for farmers to grow these heritage grains and explore all of the flavor benefits when they made their way to the bakery and the end user. And by pooling resources together, these various partners were able to create like local milling facilities. There's a great mill in Skowhegan now that is really kind of the heart of the grain economy that I'm familiar with in Maine, that was actually built out of an old disused prison. So it was just this big cavernous space, and they brought in small scale milling infrastructure to kind of build this into the economy and make that flow from farmer to business work. And it reminds me of that, because I think if we bring together the producers and the manufacturers who are interested in using those products and are able to kind of show that there's enough interest on both ends that we've got to be able to create that kind of middle piece that's going to make it work. But I do know that the bottleneck in so many of these heritage grains and ancient grain pipelines really happens at the milling and processing point. So it's a tricky job to solve. I know you asked about policy solutions, and I honestly don't know if certainly from a federal perspective whether there's kind of enough organization around this issue for policy to move forward here that would help aid. I think it's more likely to be solutions that come at a more local level, but that's just kind of what I suspect based on kind of the things that the federal the FDA and USDA are seem to be focused on right now.
Thank you.
Yes, I can also add something in that we are working in India, where we in the policy level there are a lot of changes. If I say from the different states and all that, where we come from the concept of making farmer producer organizations, where because most of the farmers, those who grow millets, are small and marginal farmers. So if we can bring them together on one platform, like forming a farmer producer organizations, and when these farmers like 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 farmers are there, where there is formation of farmer producer organizations, so they can also help in developing or it can be like a suggestions we can submit to the government level, so that the policy comes in favor of them. So in the long run, we are working in that frame, where we also involve the self-help groups into this, and the community, where the community interest groups also we are forming up, so that they can come together, and the investment cannot happen from individual level, but as a group level it can happen. So I will suggest it, if it's kind like a policy level is made in that sense, I think that can do well.
Thank you, Tapas.
Can I respond to that? From my experience, over 30 years ago, I had a small seed processing plant, millet seed processing plant, and they introduced different registered and certified varieties to the market. But what I did is installed 2 hullers, or you call them dehullers, and that was specifically for a bird food trial market. And I suggest that rather than expecting a large mill to come in and be adopting early on large volumes of proso millet, you would be much more likely to go to, as Tapas said, for example, the farm level, or I guess maybe it was Carolyn, the farm level, but it'd have to be a farm level that has a millet screener, a gravity table, at least 1 gravity table, preferably 2, and a what do you call it? A laser machine that sorts out the discolored and non-millet seeds. And then lastly, at least a huller. Is quite a slow process. I would say at least 2. I had 2. And so from there, once you have it, those types of plants usually have bagging machines because they sell bagged certified seed. Then I would take that bagged hulled millet and I would target the smaller users that are looking for smaller quantities, the brewers, the pasta makers, the small mills. That is the simplest and financially most feasible way of introducing it. And then once that step is taken, I'm certain larger processors will buy it. I did want to comment further that as far as quantities available, this year I would estimate about 500 million plus pounds of proso will be available outside the birdseed market. And so there's plenty of proso produced, and a great share of that will be either exported or going into some of the other miscellaneous feed markets, because only approximately 1% is used for seed. Not more than 1% is used for food. The balance goes into bird feed. Majority goes into bird feed, and then the rest of the markup will be shuffled off into lower value markets.
Wow, those are interesting numbers, Gary. Other questions? Jump right in. Don't be shy.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, a couple of questions. I'll just ask one for Carolyn now and then one for Tapas later if we have time. The one for Carolyn concerns the survey, which is quite interesting. I'm wondering, first of all, are you planning another one in like 2024? And would it be possible to somehow tap onto that an addendum for relating to the International Year of Millets follow-up in terms of knowledge and what they've heard about it and so on. And then another interesting angle on that is the demographics. I think what I've found as a consumer, and I'm kind of adventuresome, one of those adventuresome people that you talk about in your profile there, is I'll go to like Asian and a few African markets that I can find and source a number of things. And it seems to me that there's a whole set of demographics of people that maybe your survey captured who are buying various different kinds of products with millets that may be escaping your whole grains stamp. They're not stamped, but there's a lot going on there. So I'm not sure if there's a way to capture that sort of market, those sort of markets. Anyway, that's mostly interested in whether you're going to do a follow-up and whether we can work maybe on expanding that in the millets direction. Thanks.
Yeah, so we do a consumer insights survey every 2 years. So we'll do another one in 2025. We are considering some kind of supplementary survey for next year because the surveys have proven to be so popular. And we want to kind of ask different questions, just because if you ask year over year, we don't see quite as much change. And it's better to leave a little bit more time to really see where things are moving. But we are thinking about what topics we might cover in a kind of supplementary edition, shall we say, in 2024. And it would be fun to include a section on millets just to see if we can find where the movement has been as a result of the International Year of Whole Grains. So definitely let's connect on that and think about what that would look like, and maybe we can put something out in the spring.
Thanks,
and
Carolyn.
Yeah, and to get to your other question, certainly there are products that are not captured in our stamped product database. I don't know the best way to capture those. I know you can access sales data through various kind of data collection groups. We work with, we have a data sharing partnership with one called Spins that focuses a lot on like organic and specialty markets. And for a price, you can get information on the kind of the lift that you see in various categories for certain periods of time. And you can really drill down into that data, but it's really sales data specifically. I don't know if there's a way to access just kind of a library of what's available. I'm not sure if anyone kind of keeps track of where we're up to in terms of variety. But
yeah, that's tricky. I mean, I personally been doing some stuff that's really ad hoc and not scientific, and what you see in terms of data is not really parsed out that way. That brings me to actually to the other question. It has to do with labeling, because a lot of times the products are brought in, the bills of lading and what comes into the country, into the U.S. at least, don't go past the word millet usually. And then products, though, I have actually been noticing some have been changing, at least among the products from India. So actually, this brings me to the question for Tapas is, I at one point was noting that all the millets, imported and not, they just tended to have as an ingredient millet, or maybe organic millet, or maybe whole millet. They wouldn't tell you about the variety. And that was something I wanted to see some change in. But recently I noticed that a number of products coming in from India, imported into the US, have added, they'll say whether it's barnyard millet or pearled proso millet or what have you. They actually are being much more specific than they used to be, and that's not a USDA requirement. So I'm wondering if on the Indian side at Tufts, if you're aware of any kind of discussions about the of being more precise in labeling. I'm not sure exactly how that's come about, but it's just very interesting. I noticed looking at Indian markets and the products there recently, a lot more specificity in the labeling, which I think is a very good thing.
If I say nowadays the labeling is coming up, if I say we were moreover particular to a millet where we cover everything under like an category of millet like barnyard, brown top and everything. But nowadays it is coming out labeling in every sense. But when we come to millets also, the nutrition profiles also changes when we changes a variety. If it's like if you like a finger millet has like more than 200 to 300 varieties. So recently we done around 20 land races varieties which is not into the seed chain, and we have been seeing that the nutrition is different for each and every variety. If we are talking about barnyard millet also the similar cases we see where the nutrition is different. So yeah, if we can bring some like the nutrition profile, we can also help when we are coming with a product, we need to also ensure that what is the nutrient content in that product in that time. So that will help, because it is not that if a brown tough millet or a barnyard millet or proso millet is taken and universally the nutrient content is put upon every leveling, it is not will be the same. It will changes when we change the varieties also.
Okay, we have at least 5 minutes here. Any more questions for either presenter?
Hello, I have a question. Can I?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm Fatma Sarsu. Just I want to introduce myself. Thank you very much. Very productive webinar. I really enjoy your presentation. I would like to know, proso millet is well known for protein ratio. You know, it's more than 15 to 20%. Is it used only for bird, or I heard that baby food as well? Do you have an idea how it can be used, proso millet, except for birds, or addition to birds feed food? I don't know whom to ask, and if anyone knows, I will be happy to know. Thank you.
Yeah, most of the products that list millet in their ingredients lists here in the US are using that as a shorthand for proso millet. So we see that showing up in all of those products that I showed you in my slides that have millet listed in their ingredients. So we're seeing it especially in breads, but also in cereals and snack products. And of course, you can also purchase plain millet grains or millet flour, and most of the time here in the US, that's going to be proso millet based.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would just add that this is David Baltensperger, and proso millet is sometimes called hog millet. And it was called hog millet originally because it was brought in by some of the European ancestors who used it heavily for hog feed because it had better lysine balance than some of the others. And it certainly works in the poultry industry. Anything that works for wild bird seed works for poultry. It can be fed to cattle as well, but it's used less frequently there just because of availability and the large demand for rations in the cattle feedlots. But certainly anytime we have excess production, it goes into the poultry market first and then the hog market second. And there is a portion that's used for human food, but you mentioned the infant formulas. but it's a protein carbohydrate source. And so it blends in well for many, many human food products. The Chinese eat a huge amount of proso millet as what I would call cereal. We call it cream of wheat or cream of oats, but they eat cream of proso. And so
Right.
it's a boiled creamy product that they eat, and it's a breakfast cereal for them, which is a carbohydrate supply for the day. And if they put a little protein in with it, like a chunk of ham or a pea or a bean, that's great. But any dish you make with rice, you can make with proso.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
David.
you.
That's,
Thank you, David.
yeah, real interesting. Just a little note, all this webinar will be available. We'll send a link around to everybody, and all the previous webinars are available too, including one when David participated as a presenter. We have time for maybe a question more if anyone feels like asking either a presenter, Tapas, or Carolyn.
Sure, Jonathan. Oh, David, you have a question?
No, I wanted to thank them for their presentation. I really appreciate it. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Lydia.
Yes, I second that. Thank you so much. This has been really informative. I found it interesting. Tapas mentioned how millet's being used as a milk substitute. And I'm wondering, Caroline, I didn't see products, I may have missed it, that in the US are being used as a milk substitute, but a lot of your survey respondents were vegan. So I was wondering if there are barriers, what barriers exist to making more milk substitute products in the US? Thank you.
I believe that next month's webinar is going to cover beverages. So
That's right.
I think those presenters will be really well equipped to kind of answer this question. We do have a handful of products that include millet among other grains in a beverage, they're powdered, and so you would reconstitute them into a beverage afterwards. But it is an area where we haven't seen a huge amount, at least here in the US yet. But I think that especially with the popularity of oat milk, that there's certainly room for moving in that direction in the future. And I'm actually a little surprised that we haven't seen more of that already. So I'm excited to see next week's presentation and kind of see what the capabilities are.
Looking
Right.
forward to it. Thank you.
Yes, so is everyone. It'll be around mid-September. I will have the date for you exactly. I just wanted to thank again both Carolyn and Tapas, in particular Tapas, get some good rest, and for everyone, and to everyone for being here. It's so gratifying to see that, to have at least 20 to 30 people for each of these webinars, and I'm going to update my little database, so we'll try to get more people on the next one too. Beverages, that'll be a really fun one to participate in. So in the meantime, enjoy the rest of August and into September, a beautiful month in North America. So take care. Thank you again.